welcome back to another Consules video. Today we're going to be looking at Steersman and just going into a deeper dive of what his abilities are, especially because he has a lot going for him, and also some things that are good to keep in mind. We have a special guest on this one, Morphling. Say hi.
Hi,
Okay.
welcome.
Yep.
Good to be here.
Okay. Well, Morphling is also a pretty good expert at Steersman, as he. Do you have a win rate or some form of like credibility, perhaps?
I don't have it exactly, but it's around 50%, which is pretty decent.
Yeah, especially for steersmen. People have struggled with steersmen a little bit. Me, my, personally, have too. But over time, I have gotten the hang of it. So I guess let's get started. So first of all, let's take a look at steersman. His ability is strange form. You start the game with no water and no signet ring. Um, so let's just like talk about like the impact of no signet ring and no water. So do you want to get started, Morph?
Sure.
Okay.
So you do start with a 9 card deck, but you have no Signet Ring, which is one of your normally 3 power cards. So you get your 2 Sea Galleys and Diplomacy, but you do want to pick up some kind of decent on play card for your Triaxis.
Yep. And what about the water? Having water, obviously, very good. But when you don't have water early, what are some of the what are some things that you miss out on?
You miss out on desert tactics, so you can't go there round one, meaning you aren't usually fighting for a fast Fremen alliance, Fremen friendship. Since you don't start with water, in order to do normal things that you need to do or to have some water, it deliver supplies becomes more attractive to you early game.
Yeah. Okay. And then his hungry for spice ability. If you have three spice or you collect three spice in a single turn, you get to draw a card. This ability can be triggered at any time during your turn. It does not have to be your agent turn. You could do it on reveal. You could also play market opportunity and spend five Solari for five spice and have the ability to gain, or not the ability, but you get this effect. And then I guess his biggest strength to mitigate no water and no ring is plot course. He gets navigation cards, and every time you reach two on any faction, you get to flip the next navigation card. Key thing in mind here is that you do not have to go to a different faction to trigger this. It's not like Tessia, where once you take a poisons the snooper token, you cannot retake that one. If you go down in a faction and then go up in the same faction and you trigger this, you can trigger this ability again, activating the next navigation card. Okay, so let's just start off with his navigation cards. So these are his navigation cards, and you start with 10, each of them being good of their own. So I guess let's take a look at the first one. We have you either get a one spice, or if you spend a water, you can get acquire the spices slow. So this one pretty self-explanatory. Um, Probably like the best card. And if you see any navigation card that has a specific slot associated with it, you should probably put it in there in that specified slot. More thoughts?
Yeah, the Acquire Spices Flow one is one of the biggest reasons to get water in the early game, so that whenever you get that first friendship, you can get that point. And it may be a slight downside to add a Spices Flow to your deck early game, but there are ways to mitigate the drawback.
Yep, we'll talk about that
With
later.
the nav slot 4, yeah, with the nav slot 4, that one is a late game Spices Flow engine, gives you that extra persuasion. There are ex new ways in Bloodlines to get that extra persuasion without having to reveal it, and it can add on to a very powerful persuasion engine.
Yep. The key thing is with this is that, or at least the nav slot 4 is, you get that extra persuasion, meaning your spices will cost 8. With council, that's 6. And say you have one of the tech tiles that gives you one persuasion on reveal, That makes it 5. So all you need is 5 persuasion in your hand at the end of the round, and you have a spice of slow. Um, Good thing to keep in mind when you are playing this card and you have this card is that be aware that your special slows only cost 8. I have made the mistake multiple times where I forget that my special slows cost 8, and I try to make like a risky play where I shouldn't be, and it ends up costing me the game, or at least hurting me in some manner. Morph has spectated one of my games where I did that, but anyways, we'll continue. Okay, so we'll go to the spy one. Thoughts on this one, Morph? You either get a spy or you can recall a spy for an intrigue and two spice.
Yeah, both sides of this one are pretty good. Um, I think I slightly prefer the two spice and intrigue, but just getting a spy is very acceptable as well.
Okay, so where are you putting
Um,
this one?
where am I putting the spy?
No, 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 not the
Or
spy. Where are you
where?
where are you putting this navigation card in slots 1 through
Ah,
4?
um, usually I would put it pretty early. Um, Probably not first most of the time. Tends to be second, but it depends on what else is offered. So if I have to put it third, I'll put it third, but I think second is the most common for me on that one.
Okay, I'd agree with that. I would put this one mostly second because I'm mostly picking this card for the recall spy ability. And I'm just not getting a spy that early in the game to have this effect off as my first navigation card. So that's
Hmm.
that's that. So this card is most likely going to be placed on 2 or 3. Okay. So
Yep.
say people don't get the first navigation card, not the first navigation card, the slot 1 navigation card. What are some of the navigation cards that you're putting in slot 1 instead of that? The spices low one. Sorry.
The most common one would be the extra water and an extra
Okay.
spice if it's spacing.
Okay.
Um, Usually pretty easy to get your first two bumps in spacing, and then you get that extra water. Feels pretty good.
Okay. Thing with this is that if you hit spacing twice, you're probably going to go deliver supplies twice, and this gets you a third water, quickly building up for a deep desert play that you can get ahead of other players with. And obviously a spice if you have the timing right where you get the spacing build. It's pretty nice. Okay, that's good.
Yep.
Is there anything else you would prefer to put in the first slot, or is that I mean I guess that's about it,
Um,
right?
it's mostly those two. Yeah. If I
Okay,
have to put something else, it doesn't feel great, but you do what you have to.
okay, all right. So going off of the slot 4, right? So personally, I've found it that if I'm being given the go down one to go up one, the bump down bump up card, that pairs really well with the slot 4 navigation card, simply because I get to trigger it out quickly. I'm probably putting the bump down bump up as my third nav slot, um, or even sometimes second if I have a plan to get the third if my third one is like the spacing guild one where I end up getting another spice possibly. But most of the time I'm putting the bump down bump one up in nav slot 3 so that I can get the nav slot 4 off. Thoughts more on the bump down bump up?
Yeah, it's a good point. If you do want to put the spacing one right after that, because that means if you triggered the spacing one on slot one, or sorry, you triggered your slot one at spacing, you can still trigger your slot three at spacing, which is a very cool trick. Um, the bump down, bump up, the value isn't as high as some of the other nav cards, but as you said, it does help you sort of grease the engine and get to that slot four when you need to. It can also help you get an alliance faster. It's not as bad as some people think it is, but it's also probably not the most useful.
Okay. Yep, that's fair. So I guess next one would be the five spice or five spice for a point or a card draw. This one, you can take the path or you can take the stage. Where do you put this one?
Yeah. Um, if I don't have the slot four, this one usually goes in slot four. It's a reasonable late game option. So say if it's round seven, I'm gonna get my last friendship. Maybe I don't think I'm fighting the combat. I pay 5 spice and get a point.
So
If I am trying to buy spices flow and maybe I don't have 5 spice or I need 5 spice of something else, then drawing a card helps you buy spices flow. Still pretty useful.
okay,
If I do have slot four, then it probably goes in slot three.
okay, that makes sense. I would agree with that. Sometimes I actually do like placing this as on a slot two, simply because if I don't have the spice slow point early, then I know that my water is going to be converted into possibly like a Haga basin or some sort of spice generation. And with that, I usually end up hitting five spice, especially if the combat matches with some of the ones giving you spice on second and thirds, sometimes even first. But sometimes I see myself putting this in the second slot simply because I get an early point. And I'd argue that in a slot two is probably being triggered by like round three or round four, and if you get a five spice for a point, you can possibly rebuild that spice later on in the game to for like a round seven combat or to do whatever else you want. But most of the times, this is all slot three and slot four, but that's personal preference. Okay, we'll go to the next one. Okay, the troops. This one. We'll start with
Um,
where should you put it?
this one's a bit tricky. So you want to trigger this when you go to combat. So that's usually either Fremen or Highlander. Um, if you have a different, let's say you had the water for spacing, so you probably don't want to trigger at Highlander. So it mostly leaves Fremen. So I would say that's a more of a mid game. Try to win a tier two combat for a match. So I'm probably putting that in slot three.
Okay, I'd agree. I'd agree. Nothing really else to add on to that. And then, ooh, these are the last three. So we have one spice, or you spend two Solari and get a bump with somebody else. It's like a Duke Leto ability. Get somebody else. Get a faction. Oh, sorry, it's not a Duke Leto ability. Gain a faction, gain a influence where with a different faction where you have two or more influence. So where do you usually place this?
Um, So I would put this usually ends up at three, or I guess you could put it at two if you have the one of the next ones that you're about to talk about, the one for the alliance. This
Yep.
does help you get an alliance. It does not help you get friendships, so um, keep that in mind. If you're not, if you don't have the two Solari on hand, you're just getting an extra spice. Um, to be honest, this ends up being one of the weaker ones usually, so I don't. Sometimes I just leave it out. But if I do need to use it, it probably ends up being in slot three, when I think I probably could have the Solari to afford it.
Yep, I'd agree totally with this one. This is most likely a slot three navigation card, simply because the early Solari I probably want to hold on to for a council early, or even Swordmaster, or even Privilege if I have two on Emperor. And I don't, and mainly Sardukars. And we'll talk about the skills later. But this is a slot three. Next, we'll go to the Alliance one. Pretty simple, straightforward. I guess I'll start with this one. Personally, this is a very slot four card, simply because the other navigation cards are just so much better to the point where I prefer to trigger those earlier in the game and then have this one later just for an extra spice. But thoughts on this one, Morph? Where would you place this?
Um, it goes probably in slot four unless you have the better in slot four. So I agree with most of what you said. Um, it does make me want to rush an alliance if I have it in, let's say, slot three. But that means now you're very faction focused and you want to get those. Um, it takes like 8 bumps to trigger it at slot three with an
Yeah.
alliance. So you have
Hmm.
to really rush that in order to get the value.
Okay. Yep. And then finally, trashing. Though if you trash a card that costs one or more, you get two spice. This is basically just an Irulan ability, but you don't have to trash from hand. So you can trash from your discard, trash from wherever. But if it costs one persuasion to buy, this card can obviously be paired very well with the Spice of Slow one. So if you have slot one, if you buy a Spice of Slow and you have the ability to trigger the next navigation card, which is going to be the trash one, quickly with the Spice of Slow card in discard or in hand, very good of an ability. And this is most likely going to be a slot two if I have it. Um,
Hmm.
the later it goes, the more I guess the less important trashing becomes because the game has gone on for so long. You want to either trash
Right.
early or not trash at all. So the other nav cards are going to be much better unless you don't have a not nav slot four card and you end up with the bump down bump up. Then I guess this one could be a slot three, just to place it somewhere. Um, but I think that's about it. More of any additional like comments or
Yeah, for
remarks?
the trashing one, if you do see a card on the row that gives you a bonus while trashed, obviously that it sort of incentivizes you to put this one maybe somewhat earlier so that you can get that value. Like trashing, there's a card that gives you two troops when you trash it, or
Yep.
commander on trash. Those are decent value for doing it with this card because you get the extra two spice as well.
But keep in mind, you do have to make sure that that card is trashable at that moment that you do trigger this. And timing that can be quite difficult. But if you
Hmm.
can pull it off, fair play. And good on you for getting that two spice. Okay, so these are the nav cards, and we've talked about what slot they should go in.
One of the things that we need to talk about while we're playing Steersman is when should you pick him? Or what are some good scenarios where you should pick Steersman? So obviously, if Spice of Slow is the contract is on the contract row, it's a pretty good buy. Similarly, if there's some big cards on the row like Steersman, Possible Futures, or even some seven costers like Imperial Throne Ship, Steersman can be a good buy here. Why? Because you start with only nine cards in your deck, meaning you lose out on a card that only rerolls for one persuasion. So instead, if you were to rotate that out with like a card like Prepare the Way, now you're running a 10 card deck, except now you have three basically cards that real for two persuasion. If you trash your Seek Allies, that's going to be another card gone. So if you can stack yourself with a couple of two persuasion cards, like a two Prepare the Ways, that's going to easily push you forward to buying a pretty good card on a round three or maybe even a round two, depending on your draw. But for me personally, I have found that most success when I play steersman in either second position or third position. Third position is simply for the fact that I'm most likely going to be first to reveal on round three, meaning if I have bought a couple of prepare the ways, I am going to be getting a pretty good card, unless somebody else early reveals for it. But being in third position also allows you to early reveal first, unless somebody gives up two actions to buy this card. Um, the other reason why I like it in third position is that also round seven you get to start the round, meaning that the prime spots are available to you, meaning espionage, meaning research station, meaning even highliner if you're playing combat style, um, and that allows you to close out the game quickly on round seven. But those are my preferences for playing steersman in position three. Um, I like in position two because of the navigation cards. Since you have a nine card deck, assuming that you draw one faction access round one and then one faction access on round two, you're going to be able to trigger off a navigation card as long as you go to, I guess, say Doubler Supplies twice. But that also assumes that you don't get blocked on Doubler Supplies by person sitting in position one. Most of the time, the player sitting in position one is going to be going for MKit. So deliver supplies or Sardukar, sorry, not Sardukar, dutiful service is most likely going to be open to you, allowing you for some easy ways to accelerate your navigation cards. Or obviously, if you have the slot one navigation card, the double water at deliver supplies is pretty good for you. Um, yeah, personally, in position two and position three, that's where I like steersman to be the best. Position four is probably a little bit, I guess, if I were to rank the positions that I would play steersman in, it would be position 3, position 2, then position 4, and then finally position 1. The reason why I don't like Steersman in position 1 is because obviously like the card cycle. So if there's a good card on the row, you're going to be third to reveal for it, or by round 3, assuming that you have persuasion, or like everybody else also has persuasion to build up to round 3. So you're most likely going to have to early reveal. And with Steersman, you want to have good action economy. You need to make sure that you get your resources. You need to be able to get your navigation cards off. So if that early reveal is not valuable enough, it sometimes feels bad. In position 4, I like it because same thing. You're second to reveal, so if player 3 doesn't even make an attempt to go for a big card, it allows you a better option with like high council and things like that. The thing with position 4, I prefer it over position 1 is because of round 1 conflicts. In round 1 conflicts, position 1 tends to be a little bit hesitant when deploying troops because they don't know how much position 2, 3, or 4 are going to be deploying because they all are going to act after position 1. And with position 4, since you have that ability to act last, you can decide if you want to enter the combat on round 1, or you can hold off and go say things like assembly hall, gather support, accept contract, and pick up some persuasion for yourself. But that's my personal preferences on where I'm playing Steersman.
Next up, let's go to his how do we mitigate the fact that he has no ring or he has no water to begin with. So first of all, to mitigate his ring, right? So what is his ring? What is the most important function of the ring? It's the fact that it has tri-access, right? So simply picking up a card that has tri-access easily mitigates this ability. Yes, it may not be, you may not get an actual effect of the ring from this card, but you also have to look at some of the other rings, like say Muad'Dib, he just gets a card draw. So if you get a tri-access with a card draw on it, I feel like that's pretty good. So these are some of the tri-access that I have labeled out here. Undercover asset, you get to ignore all influence requirements. The good thing with this is that you can easily go to Siege Tabra without hooks, and now you have a source of water for research station to get spice with slows, or even go shipping with this, and then get faction bumps, get council with the Solari that you get from here. Obviously, it has no persuasion on reveal, but you get a spy, which can be used for persuasion with a recall effect, or and the two swords for combat purposes if you need to. Um, Next up, we have Cargo Runner. This one simply, if you have 2 contracts completed, you get a card draw. If you have 4, you get 2 card draw. It's just tri-access. But these 4 cards so far are simply just tri-accesses. That's why I've labeled them out, and they help mitigate Steersman ability of having a ring. Morph, anything to add on to this?
Um, no, not really. That like just having the flexibility of not being forced to play your dagger to green, your recon to blue, just helps a lot.
Some cards that even you might even think of buying. Maybe they don't have tri-access, but Prepare the Ways, obviously very good. You get a card draw if you have 2 on Benny. Yes, you don't have the ability to do something on yellows, meaning your dunes have to go to yellows, and dunes don't have any effect, so you don't do anything off of them. But picking up some Mala pistols are pretty good. Um, so one of the things with Steersman is that since he has no ring, in your first starting 10 cards, you only have 1 blue access. So your first card that you buy generally should be a card that has at least some form of blue access. So if none of these cards are on the row which have tri access, at least pick up a Prepare the Way. So the card that so that you have something going for you except for the recon, or like some way to get to blue spaces. Um, Especially because Yrkoon is good for card draw, and Refinery is useful for getting that Solari. Um, yep, I guess that's about it for mitigating his no ring ability. Next up, we have one of the things with Steersman is that if you do end up getting the navigation card with a spice slow, and say you don't have the slot to where you can trash that spice slow, now you just have a freely like roaming spice slow, and what you do with it. Um, so we've put out cards here that have a ability to discard a Space Ingot card, and you get some effect off of them, and that's probably one of like the best uses of that Spice Slow. So I've labeled out here four cards, Morph. I have Guild Envoy, I have Space Time Folding, I have what's this one called? Observer, and just some any other spacing good cards that give you some ability on discard or just spacing cards in general are pretty good for a synergy with Steersman. Um,
Yep.
Anything to add on to the Morph?
Um, Not too much. Just so yeah, so you get a pretty decent bonus for being able to discard that Spice's Flow to any of these effects. Whether they give you that extra spy for a later draw or give you that double card draw, try to hit Spice's Flow on your actual reveal. I think yeah, all of that is pretty useful. And because there's a natural spacing synergy, you can more easily push for spacing alliance and just makes your game flow more easily.
Yep. And if you're picking up some of these guild envoys and space knife holdings, then picking up some like disguised bureaucrats where you have to discard spacing good cards and you get some other effect off them are pretty good. It doesn't have to be that your spice slow always lines up with this card or with your discarding to draw a card. Sometimes if you have some other spacing good cards, that synergy could also easily be fulfilled. If you look at some of the triaxes that we've labeled out, Undercover Asset, Cargo Runner, and Double Agent are all spacing good cards, so these guys can also help with your synergy with discarding draw or discarding for some effect with spacing guilds. Um, okay, we'll go on to the next set of cards. So the next set of cards we have labeled here are just faction accesses. So the thing with Steersman is that the reason why he has some power is because of his nav slots or his I guess his navigation cards. And if you don't trigger those navigation cards, he just feels like a blank leader. So picking up some cards that have some access in general to spaces to obviously activate these cards is generally good or pretty good for steersmen. So I've labeled out some having some access in your deck is just pretty good. Personal preference, I do like True Trance because it has access everywhere. So you can simply, if you have 2-1 on one faction, you don't have to go there. If you want to trigger your next navigation card quickly, you can take this to the space that you don't have the where you don't have two yet. Um, some good cards with faction accesses that you should be picking up, regardless if you're steersman or not, is Quash Rebellion. Um, you want to talk about this more? I know you're pretty good with Quash. Um,
Um, as you alluded to earlier, there are new Sardukar commanders in Bloodlines, and Quash Rebellion conveniently gives you two Solari to buy a commander at any of the spaces that it can go to pretty much. I think besides Highlander. So it's great for that. It's great for getting you closer to High Council or Swordmaster, and it's just a good
the reveal
flexible card
effect,
in general.
yeah, the reveal effect is
The
also pretty
reveal
good.
effect is pretty fun too. Yeah.
If you have a commander in the conflict, you get 2 persuasion and you get 2 swords. That's regardless if you have a commander or not. But generally, it's a pretty good card. One of the cards that I have labeled out here is Elite Forces. On its face value, it doesn't look like a good card, but if I said like from previously, you're probably picking up some spacing good cards, and with spacing good cards, the emperor like you might be picking up some emperor cards too, especially with cards like intelligence report, not report, sorry, intelligence. What is it called? Intelligence training. This is a good
Training.
emperor card to obviously end up trashing with elite forces, or say like a double agent, not cargo runner, undercover assets. Some of these cards where you've had the full use of them and you can get rid of them later. Something like Sardukar soldiers, or even what's the one that gives you a Sardukar on trash? I forgot what card that is, but that one obviously if you end up trashing it, it's also an Emperor card. You can take this card to Sardukar and you get 4 troops and an intrigue at Sardukar. If you end up trashing another Emperor card, you get another troop, another intrigue, If you have two Solari, you can recruit that commander and get a skill with it. And that's that's basically a mini Highlander. Actually, it's not even mini Highlander. It's a Highlander plus plus more because you get two intrigues out of it too. One of the most fun combinations that I did have with this synergy was that I ended up playing this card. I ended up trashing an Emperor card, and I had two on Emperor, which allowed me to trigger this navigation card, which I got three Solari for three Solari for three troops, allowing me to deploy basically my whole garrison into the conflict, and that allowed me to win round seven, and which effectively ended the game where I won. But those are some of the good cards that I have found to be pretty effective with Steersman. Holy War also being one of them. Um, more thoughts on Holy War?
Hey, it has lots of faction access, anything anywhere besides Fremen on the faction, and it really pressures your opponent's garrisons, retaxes them, and it lets you sort of deploy less and get more out of the combat.
What are
Um,
your thoughts on its reveal effect?
the reveal effect, if opponents aren't ready for it and you have that Fremen bond, you can send the troop on reveal, two more from your garrison. Maybe you buy a Sardukar commander on your reveal. You can send four troops pretty easily that way. If you also have a hardy fifth troop, so it can be pretty scary on make your reveal turns very scary for your opponent.
Yep. You're probably not playing this card for its reveal effect on Steersman because it's basically effectively a diplomacy. So you're probably going to be playing this card to your faction spaces to get your navigation cards off. But obviously, the reveal effect, if your opponents are not ready for it, can be pretty good. One of the other cards I've labeled out here is Urgent Shigawire. If you end up buying, Prepare the Ways because it has blue access, this card could be pretty good for you because it allows you to prepare the ways to have more access along. Well, it has yellow. It gives you try access plus more, and it gives you a card draw along with the card draw that Prepare the Way already has. So you get two card draw and you get access everywhere. But this is only good if you're picking up other Bene Gesserit cards. So if you're playing a Space and Guild Synergy card or a Space and Guild Synergy deck, this card probably not that useful for you. But that's I guess that's about it. But Steersman, you probably want to be picking up some card that has some form of faction access or some form of ability to go to all three spaces, try access with your ring, and you want to be able to have cards that give you the discard to draw if you have the slot one navigation card, which allows you to spice slow. Some of the other cards that we have labeled out are bump cards on reveal. So Captured Mentat, Pointing the Way, and Ixian Ambassador. These three cards. Morph, do you want to talk about why these are important or what the utility of these cards are?
Well, Steersman loves faction bumps, so free faction bumps are great. Um, the Captured Mentat does also let you trigger your navigation cards, just like the bump up, bump down nav card does. So um, lets you do some pretty cool things on your reveal turn, and let's say, oh, I pay 5 spice, I draw for a point because I got my last navigation card. Then I also have a Spiceless Flow, picked up that last friendship, and suddenly you're at a surprise 10 points when no one was ready for it.
Okay, yeah, that seems about right. Oh, sorry, oops. Okay. So we have Pointing the Way and Ixian Ambassador. These two cards, if you end up getting them, are oops. Um, where would it go? Game. Um, okay. These three cards, Ixian Ambassador, Capture Mentat, and Pointing the Way. If you get a bump, whenever you get a bump, command is pretty easy to pull off. So Pointing the Way is pretty good. Ixin Ambassador, you do have to work for it. You do have to buy two tech tiles. If some of the tech tiles are cheap to buy, this is pretty good because you get bumps on reveal. And again, as Morph said, you can easily end up triggering navigation cards, um, especially the 5 spice for a point one, because you basically get to wait until your reveal turn to end up having to trigger that. So you can collect spice all the way throughout your turns. Okay, that's about it. And then finally, we come back here, and we have spice on reveal. So why is spice on reveal good? Other than the fact that it's just good in general, but on Steersman it's even better because of his ability, right? He has the ability for Hungry for Spice, where he can get at each time he gains 3 spice or more in a turn, he gets to draw a card. So if you have cards that allow him to get spice on reveal, right? So say these cards don't particularly have persuasion on them, but if you end up even if they don't have persuasion on them, if you end up getting 3 spice or more in that turn, you can end up drawing a card with persuasion. So not only will you have recovered that persuasion that you have lost, but you also gain 2 spice and more spice off of it. And we know for Steersman in general that spice is very key, especially for some of his points, for shipping. What else is spice good for? Or I guess in
Spice
general,
also lets you go highliner, buy techs.
yeah.
Um, there are many ways to use your spice to get points. Yeah, so spice is great for steersman, and it's pretty great in general. Yes.
Okay. So the cards that we've labeled out here, obviously, priority contracts, Smuggler's Haven. Smuggler's Haven also has a dual purpose where you can end up spending 4 spice for a point. Again, gives you another utility for that spice that you get on reveal. And you getting 3 spice on reveal with these cards specifically is not that hard, especially saying expecting if we're assuming that you have 1 spice slow in your deck with the navigation card here. The spicy slow one. If you end up drawing that spicy slow, you basically reveal that one for one, and you reveal one of these two cards for two, total of three, and you draw another card, maybe getting you some more persuasion for um, another spicy slow and other cards that are pretty good. Um, Southern Faith, pretty good because you get 2 spice on command. Southern Faith is also pretty good because it also has it's dual purpose because it has card draw, it has Fremen access, meaning it allows you to trigger one of your nav cards with the Fremen, and 2 swords on reveal along with the persuasion. So this one does a lot. You do have to spend five persuasion for it when you do acquire it, but for the cost, I do think it's one of the better cards. Northern Watermaster, I again, water is pretty good. Also, this card has blue access, which you are missing out on if you don't have when you don't have your ring. So this card on a round one buy, spectacular. Fremen Bond Fremen Bond, if you do end up picking up another Fremen card, could be useful. But in terms of cards, these are like the sets that we've labeled out. And then finally, we have the cards that I guess you should be picking up regardless of who you are, if you're steersman or not. But with steersman, most of the times, say these cards you should be picking up if it's on even if it's round four and you're given the choice between spice or slow and not and picking up this card. I feel like sometimes you should think about picking up these cards. Um, Now, why would you want to spice slow round four if it's early in the game? Is because steersman has the ability to end the game really quick. So steersman puts everybody else effectively on a timer. Same way that Guild Spy does in Uprising. Um, Steersman has that ability without having Guild Spy. Morph, um, agree, disagree? Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, steersman. Yeah, if you buy spice of flow round four, round five, round six, can does not take much else to get you all the way to 10. Um, Now, some of the cards you did pull out are very powerful, so yeah, you may want to buy those over Spice of Flow. But most of the time, if you can buy Spice of Flow, you buy Spice of Flow.
Yep. So the cards that I've pulled aside are Imperial Throne Ship. First of all, very good card. You get a bump on reveal. So, not reveal, on purchase. So some of the cards, some of the, I guess, my use cases, personal use cases with this card is that I've had one influence on the Emperor, and I buy this, allowing me to trigger my first navigation card, which allows me to spend a water for a spice slow. So effectively, I get 2 points in my just reveal turn. So that's been pretty good for me. It also is just another diplomacy, simply like just like Sardukar, well, not Sardukar, Quash Rebellion, and Try Access as well. And the best part is the fact that it has a reveal effect, allowing you to get 3 persuasion and up to three Solari, as long as you have four more garrison units. With this, however, you are restricted in the fact that you cannot deploy into the combat, but you probably want to be playing this card. You want to be playing this card earlier in the game, and you want to be revealing this card later in the game for those heavy spice slows. Um, Next up, we have Public Spectacle. I mean, self-explanatory. Just a good card. It has a it has a spy on reveal, so you get the spy back anyway. So if you end up revealing this card, an espionage trip never hurts. Guild Spy has an obvious mention here because, well, Steersman is going to be picking up spice must flows, and um, if you know you're getting a if you have Guild Spy and you have a turn where you don't when you were sure that you're not going to get a Spice Slow, you can always play this card to a Spy space and discard one of your Spice Slows to get obviously another card and an Intrigue. Um, Pretty good. It's also 3 persuasion, so it never hurts to buy. Chome Demands. This one is a Chome directorship basically on reveal. But you have to have completed 4 contracts. If you are on the path of already completing 4 contracts, I would probably pick up this card instead of a Spicy Slow on round 4. But obviously, if I haven't completed any contracts, this card on round 4 seems pretty useless. Or maybe. Thoughts on this one specifically, Morph?
Well, show 'em demands. Round 4 is a little late for it, but any earlier than that, and it can be very powerful. Um, it's a free contract completion whenever you send it to accept contract. If you go there every other round, it's it's still quite good. And especially some of those contracts draw you cards, so you might just draw back into it next round. Yeah, still very scary card. If it does pop up, as you said, like in the mid game, sometimes your position doesn't really let you maximize it, but if you can get that reveal off for the full 4 faction bumps, it can be very powerful.
Uh-huh. Okay. Corinth City. This is the next one. Morph, do you want to talk about this one, or like why it would be specifically good on Steersman?
Yeah, so the most powerful part about Corinth City, especially early game, is the 5 Solarion reveal. That can single-handedly give you High Council. It boosts you more than halfway to Swordmaster. And not to mention, in the late game, if you don't think you can buy Spices Flow and you have 5 Solari, gets you a Emperor bump and a point. Or you can even send it to Council. You can still get that, pay that 5 Solari for a point. Yeah, very strong in the late game as well for probably a more non-combat strategy. And it can definitely get you to that lovely 10-point threshold on those last round or two.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Nothing to add there. And then finally, we have Interstellar Trade. We have it allows you to buy a contract on purchase, and you get a bump on play. Try access also allows you to, or not allows you. I guess it's it nullifies out your ring. Gives you probably one of the best on play effects with a bump. And on reveal, pretty good too because it allows you to get a persuasion for each contract you've completed. Um, Pretty self-explanatory on the why this card is good. Multi-purpose, you get bumps. You get bumps, meaning you get navigation cards off. You get contracts completed, meaning you get Solari most likely. And on reveal too, once you've completed this contract, this card can easily become like a 3 persuasion or 4 persuasion card. Um, but yeah, in terms of cards, I think this is all we have to say. Any other cards you would like to mention out there, Morph, that we might have missed?
Um, no, I think we talked about most of them. Obviously there are some. I don't think we mentioned any of the 8 costers, but those are
Yeah.
powerful enough that yeah, you probably just want to buy them when you see them and you can afford it.
Um, yeah, I guess I mean that's about it for cards. So I guess next up the question is, what about tech tiles, right? I mean, since Bloodlines adds so much to this game, tech tiles being one of them, what should Steersman be picking up in terms of tech tiles? So we've done here a little bit of a tier list for Steersman specifically, and we've labeled what should you pick up and possibly even when. And we'll talk about just when you should pick up. We're only going to be talking about some like the S and A tiers because the rest of the tiers, the rest of the tech tiles are very situational in the sense that you may want to pick them up if the cards and your overall board state allows you to do that. Um, but anyways, let's get started. If you want to, pause the video and take a look at all these, you can. So first of all, we have Delivery Bay. It's an S tier simply because for 3 spice, um, you, you get a card draw allowing you for spice and slows and other high persuasion cards too. And the best part is on reveal effect. If you have command, and in most scenarios, Steersman does end up getting uh, a lot of turns where he hits at least 6 persuasion. So he gets passive 2 Solari for this. This is very good because he gets High Council, he gets Privilege, Swordmaster, just to name a few, and even Commanders. More thoughts on Delivery Bay?
Yeah, especially like in once you get that extra persuasion from your nav slot 4, if you get that, command 6 becomes even easier. It, it's a card that very easily snowballs into having that 6 command every single turn, and 2 Solari every turn is no joke. So yeah, one of my favorites as Steersman.
Okay. Next up, we have here Glow Globes, Plasteel Blades, and Self-Destroying Messages. Which one, like, do you want to talk about these individually or just like as a whole, why these guys are good?
Um, I'll just talk on just messages because I
Okay.
think this one especially gets better for Steersman. The stacking of extra persuasion just makes Spice of Slow super easy in the late game. You don't even need to draw any extra cards. Just reveal 3 cards for 5 persuasion. Have this tech, have your nav card, have your high council, gets you to 9. And that becomes a Spice of Slow every turn and lets you rack up those points really quick.
Yep. Um, I mean, nothing to add on to that. Two intrigues early on in the game can be pretty useful too. I mean, some good
Yep.
intrigues that you could possibly be looking for is obviously the matches in combat, where you end up in a position where you just don't have to ever fight a combat, and that's pretty good for you.
Mm-hmm.
Some intrigues like opportunism, where you end up with some extra bumps, pretty good. Strategic stockpiles, obviously, and market opportunity, very good for you because the $5 for 5 spice conversion allows you to trigger that hungry for spice ability again. So you get another card draw off of it. But so those are some intrigues that you're really looking for. But again, the intrigues you draw are situational. Mainly, you're buying self-destroying messages for the real turn effect. Then we have glow globes, 2 persuasion, 2 spice, and you get a bump. That bump allows you to trigger your navigation cards, possibly if you are specifically looking to trigger that navigation card at that moment. This um, this tactile can get you there, especially in situations where you have the spice slow card on slot 1, and then you've bought that spice slow and you want to get rid of that with your trashing in slot 2. So you have to basically take your second turn and you don't have another diplomacy, so you have to take your second turn to a green space with a dagger. You buy this card or this tactile, allowing you one influence on another faction, triggering that slot, a nav slot card, and then you end up trashing that spice low, getting 2 spice off of it. You get the value back on this card, and this card allows you to look at the top card of your deck at any time. Given that you have a deck, you cannot reshuffle this. Reshuffle your deck if you don't have a deck. But this is pretty good when you have cards where you know you're getting a turn where you're going to get 3 spice, and you want to know what your next card is, or things like privilege, and if it's even worth going to privilege, if you know that your next card is a dagger, so maybe you might as well save that 3 Solari for like another turn. Um, I mean, that's all I have for glow globes. Anything else you want to add on to Morph?
Mm, No, no. Yeah,
Okay,
glow globes, especially for that one spice. It's great.
yeah. One spice, he's assuming that you have High Council.
Assuming you
In
have high
Bloodlines,
council,
yeah,
yes. Yeah.
yeah. Bloodlines, you get 1 Solar, you get 1 spice off of every tech tile you buy if you do have High Council. Okay, so Plasteel Blades. This one, whenever you recruit a Sardukar commander, you can trash that tech tile and get a additional skill. You get 4 Solari on buying the card. Um, I mean, this card obviously is S tier regardless on Steersman, regardless of anybody. And we'll talk about which skills are pretty effective on Steersman. So if you see 2 skills that are very, very good for Steersman, definitely think about picking this up early game. Um, don't worry, you're probably not the only one that has this idea. Other leaders are going to have the same idea too. Okay, so next up we have rapid dropships. This one, I mean, if you are playing a combat heavy game, this could be pretty good. But generally, it's A tier simply because it's just a good tech to have, but not because it's like that. It's specifically good on Steersman. The Steersman specific cards are Delivery Bay, Self Destroying Messages, and Glow Globes. You probably want to pick these up if you're a Steersman. Um, Training Depot could also be one of them because again, you're going to be hitting 6 persuasion commonly, and even for one troop, getting that third place reward with those extra 2 swords um, could be useful. Because say you get like extra 2 spice with some of the third place rewards, some extra Solari here and there could be useful because a steersman does need to keep track of his resources. Anything else you want to add on to either dropships or Training Depot, Morph?
No, no. They, of course, help facilitate combat, a more combat focused strategy. If you're doing that, they get better.
Okay. Panopticon, obviously, I mean, the only reason it's here is because it's just one of like the best tactiles in the game. Maybe you're not getting the end game ability off on Steersman, because you probably want to, trigger your navigation card. It's like having spy satellites on Tessia, pretty useless, because you want to get your snooper tokens. But the reveal turn effect on Panopticon is very good because you get, especially early in the game, you get spy and you get a troop every round reveal turn. If you get this by like round 3, round 4, that means you're getting a spy and a troop on round 4, round 5, round 6, and round 7. I don't know, for 5 spice, or I guess 4 spice if you have council. Getting 4 spies and 4 troops is pretty good. Additional endgame effect too, if you need it. And then finally, we have navigation chamber. Simply a similar reason to glow globes. It is a little bit more expensive, but if you do end up buying this tactile early in the game, you can get that 5 spice worth, uh, as long as I mean with cards, not cards, but if you go to spaces like espionage or shipping, and that 1 spice eventually builds up over time. But I mean that's about it. Anything? Oh, sorry, Morph. Did you want to like add anything onto that for Panopticon or Nav Chamber?
Um, yeah. So for Panopticon, I would say how I usually think of it is a spy is usually worth a card draw, troop is worth what's a troop, and if you think back to um, the original X-Tex, you have Holtzman engine and training drones, which if you sort of combine those two effects, makes it seem like a pretty good tech, even without the end game part of it.
Yep. And then these are just some tactiles that we've labeled out here. We're not going to go into each one of them specifically because these the B, C, and D tiers are pretty very very situational. The one tactile that you should absolutely not buy as steersman under any given circumstance is servo receivers. This one allows you a ring effect on buy, and your signal ring has these actions. But with steersman, you do not have your signal ring, so this card is effectively useless. Um, yeah, I mean that's about it. Do not buy this card under any given circumstance. And then finally, we have Sardukar commanders. So what skills are you should be buying? Or I guess we'll talk about like when should you buy Sardukar commanders if you should buy them at all. So I guess do you want to start with the when or do you want to start with the skills more?
I think you can start with the skills. The skills sort of dictate when for Steersman.
Okay. All right. We'll start with the skills. Okay. So there's seven total skills. There's loyal. There is fierce. There's hardy. Then there's canny, driven, desperate, and what's the last one? Oh, charismatic. Yeah.
Yep.
Canny, driven, desperate, and charismatic. Okay. So we'll talk about the ones that are very, very good for steersmen, right? So first of all, in my personal opinion, driven and charismatic probably the best Sardukar commanders, or sorry, skills to buy. Driven, especially very good because again, it's a spice on reveal. So if you get another spice, if you have a spice slow on reveal and you combine it with this card or like this Sardukar skill, and say you have another way to get one more spice on reveal, again, it's a card draw. Also, having this spice over time is very good for you in general. Um, I mean, yeah, that's all I can say about Driven. Spice is good. That's about it. More anything to add on?
Um, well, Driven does give you a spice on reveal, so it does add to that possible triggering of your passive if you have one of those sweet two spice on reveal cards. Um, yeah, if you want, like the next one I would really sing out is charismatic. Again, that similar to his Spearsman's Nav slot 4 um, passive, that extra persuasion. You keep stacking it. Sometimes you can get 5 passive persuasion
Yeah.
and only need 4 on reveal to buy spice of slow. So it can get um, yeah, it stacks very well with some of his other abilities.
Yep. Um, I guess the last two that we're talk about are Desperate and Canny. So the reason why you'd pick up Desperate as Steersman specifically is because the way Steersman plays combats is he plays them very selectively. Most of the times with Steersman, or at least personally, and I guess with Morph too, we haven't been getting hooks early in the game or in the later in the game. Just in general, we haven't been getting hooks because there's so many other things to do. Um, so when you have no hooks, while other people do have hooks, you want to be targeting combats that have walls, praying that the wall isn't down or has some way of going down that turn. But you want to be targeting combats that have your match and have a wall. So with cards like Desperate, they allow you to basically guarantee that combat win, along maybe some intrigues behind, and obviously you have to commit to the combat because obviously you're not going to be the only one with that symbol. Other people might also be fighting for that symbol. So with Desperate, that one combat that you decide to go in on, this helps you push your engine a little bit forward. Canny, it's the same thing. If you end up buying a Sardukar commander, say I gather support, and you want to win that combat at that moment, Canny allows you to get that extra two swords to push you forward. Fierce, hardy, and loyal. Uh, I mean, if you have three influence on Emperor, I mean, it's good. Fierce, if you know that your opponent's going to be putting in worms, it's good for you. But you probably shouldn't be targeting combats where opponents are playing worms, anyways. Unless you have worms yourself, then sure. Um, anything to add on to that, Morph?
Um, Not a lot. If you do start off with like let's say candy and um, start stacking those sword skills, um, that can be a pretty powerful combat engine, but it's pretty rare for you to have enough Solari to buy like 3 or 4 different commanders with all the different sword skills. So it's it's a very niche strategy, but it can be powerful if you do get it. It just happens more often on other leaders.
Yep. So I guess as steersmen, specifically the ones that we're gonna highlight are driven, charismatic, and desperate. Um, right? Anything else? I mean, I guess those are only the ones.
Hmm.
Then
Yeah.
we go back to basically uprising, base uprising, and contracts, right? So, what are some of the contracts that steersmen should be picking up? Or, like, if you see these contracts, don't hesitate to pick them up. Obviously, the Harvest 3, very good for you. You get 3 spice, allowing you to card draw again with this Hungry for Spice ability. And we get the 3 Solari off of it too. Again, for, Council, for Swordmaster, for Privilege, for Commanders, very good. Deliver supplies. You're steersman. You start with no water, so you need to find a way to get that water somehow. And deliver supplies is one of the easiest ways to do that. So early in the game, if you see this contract, think about picking it up. Most likely, you should be picking it up. Also, reasons why you might pick steersman before the game starts is because you see this contract, the spices flow contract, on the contract row. Um, and say you're like in position one, you can basically pick steersman in position one, and I think it's like a 60% rate, or I don't. What? Wait, actually, what's the percentage that you hit that nav card? Do you know the more? It's like is it 50?
It's
I think
50.
it's
It's
what is it?
50.
Is it 50?
There's
Uh,
10 cards. You get 5 of them. It's half. So 50%.
Is it? I guess. Okay, I think it's 50. Yeah, it's probably 50. It's 50% chance that you end up hitting that card. And the way that this card is worded, each time you acquire it, and the nav card writes it so that when you spend a water, you acquire a spice slow. So you can basically acquire that spice slow and end up getting another bump and 3 Solari for just 1 water. Um, very, very, very effective in that sense. Yeah. Also, your steersman, you're probably gonna get even if you don't hit the spice slow nav slot, you're probably gonna be hitting. You're probably gonna be getting a spice slow eventually later down the game. So this card is gonna be powerful for you regardless of um, if you have the slot one or not. And then finally, we have immediate. Simply, you get 2 Solari. If you buy add dutiful service, you get to buy the commander of on that space. Get a skill, possibly driven or charismatic, and you go from there. Any combat, not combat, contract that can be easily completed, you should probably be picking up. Espionage ones are I'm a little bit more hesitant on those simply because you have to have spice to go to espionage, and espionage is one of those spaces that is heavily contested. So if you don't end up hitting the timing of your espionage right, it feels bad. But it's also one of the ones that is easily completable. Anything to add on that, Morph?
Um, yeah, I would say the easily completed ones are great. I do love me a shout out to the secrets contract. You get 2 Solari
Oh,
and a card draw. That one feels very good to get as steersman because you want to hit your factions, and secrets is a fine spot to go to. That's usually not as contested.
yep. Um, I mean, I think we've talked about basically everything. The only thing left is, I guess, just combats, right? And like some card or like some opening theory for steersman. I guess we'll talk about combats. I think we've talked about it generally. You should, with steersman, you're kind of playing a solitaire game, but obviously you still have to fight combats to get that match. You have to basically pick and choose your combats. If you think that there's not going to be another chance for you to get that point match, then obviously go in on that combat. Even if that means going to Highlander, go to Highlander, and just make sure you get that matching point. Or if you have an intrigue that matches on endgame, then I don't know, just don't go for the combat. Um, I guess those are some of the like easier things that I can say about combat in general. More thoughts, remarks.
Yeah, so do be careful with your troops as steersman. It's obviously with Uprising, it's important to get your combat rewards, and it's important to not lose your troops for free. So when you do go harvest that 3 spice to draw an extra card, you probably do want to deploy, but do be aware of what the potential deploy is of the people behind you. So just yeah, try to maximize your combat rewards without losing your
Yeah.
troops is what I'll mostly say. When you're not fighting for the win, you just gotta be aware of what your opponents are doing for that.
Yep. I mean, that's about it. And then finally is, I guess it's just like, I guess we'll talk about some of like the opening line specifically for Steersman. What you should or what you could do when you're playing Steersman. So I guess first of the things, right? If you have slot one, your first action should be deliver supplies. I think that's like a given. Simply, it doesn't matter when you hit your slot one. You just need to make sure you have your water at that given moment. Um, there's some ways that you can get blocked on those supplies. Well, simply if somebody goes there, you get blocked. But you can find a way around that. If you still have the spicy slow one, you can find a way to get water through other ways. So one of them being one of the contracts. If the contracts have either the refinery for water or Yrkoon for water, you can pick up those and pick up the contract for Yrkoon or Spice Refinery and get your water that way so that when you do end up triggering your first snap slot, you don't have to, you don't end up missing out on your free point. Um,
Hmm.
but also, there's a lot of talk about the slot one. But in the case that you don't have spice and slow, what should you do? Um, Again, I guess it's this. It's also this. It's pretty similar. If you don't have the spice and slow contract, the nav slot, it's okay because you can go to deliver supplies still. You should still be getting your water, and your other nav slots are probably gonna require you to get to Spacing Guild first, or not Spacing Guild first, but in general, you want to be having the Spacing Guild to influence, so you can go to shipping and then get council for spice slows, and then also get external bumps for your other nav slots. Um, I guess it's pretty unlucky that you miss both nav slot 1 and nav slot 4, but in the case that that happens, you still have a chance at the game because as long as you understand the game state and you figure out what your opponents are playing, the I guess the most important thing about steersman is learning um, how strong your opponents are. Not physically, but I mean in the game, right? If you know one of your opponents has strike fleet, if you know that one of your opponents is going to be dominating combats, you want to make sure that you get your one combat point as quickly as possible, while also making sure that you give that player a hard time um, while he's trying to win combat, so that he's not the one putting you on a clock, but you're the one putting him on a clock instead. Um, what else? What else I was saying? Anything else to add on that, Morph? Or like steersman play style in terms of that, or like opening theory?
Yeah. So I agree that the play style is very much um, a slow and steady climb to usually like a round 7, 10 or 11 points. Sometimes you get on round 6. It tends to be pretty rare.
Really?
But you can get on round 6, but
I've
I
had
haven't done it much.
I've had quite a bit of round six ends with steersman. It's like it's almost to the
Uh,
point where
you
it's like
play way more than I do.
really okay. Well, I mean maybe it's a personal. It's maybe it's just a personal thing. Also maybe could be possibly be based on the quality of like the decks of my opponents. Um, and maybe the card like the my deck style and my play style. But yeah, I've had quite a bit of round six. But anyways, continue. Sorry to interrupt.
No, yeah. But yeah, if you can get like friendship on round 2, another friendship round 3, get your match round 4, you start building up to like round 4, round 5, you have 5 or 6 points. Then you get a couple more each round, then it's pretty smooth sailing. That's usually the trend that tends to happen. Um, at least when I try to play steersman. Um, you don't usually end up with a big round 7 like 4 or 5 point combat. Not really his play style. Um, slow and steady faction and spices flow. mostly off of your points. Sometimes you get some contract points. Sometimes you get some like sometimes you get a combat deck and you can fight for a couple combats. But most of the time, it's your one match, your 3 spiceless flows, 5 faction points gets you to 10, and whatever else on top of that is bonus.
Yep. I mean, nothing else to add on to that. Do you have like a specific way to play like the first 2 rounds, or like specifically of what board spaces to go to? I guess I'll give you an example. Like, say you're given a hand where you have no faction access. Um, what are you doing? Like, a quick example. No access. What are you
So
doing?
the premium spots are the 2 card draw spots, except contract, Yrkoon, and assembly hall, right? So you really want to have a good early buy. So you aim for whatever the best card you can buy on the row realistically. So try to buy that and get whatever other bonuses you can get on the way. The round 1 combat is usually mediocre. So if you can stick in a troop, if it's a match, then you can try to win it. So get your match out of the way. That's usually pretty worth it. Um,
Yep.
but yeah, if you have to go gather support and stock up, that's it's an okay play. But you usually prefer to not have to go to like Imperial Basin for 1 spice. Usually pretty low value. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I would try to not throw in a troop too early and have other people come in behind you. So especially if you're in first position. If you're in later position, you can see how the combat goes and um, put in the correct amount of strength to get a good reward. Um, and also, if you're in later position, then you usually just take what is open, since you don't have as high priority in terms of getting your best locations.
Some success that I found with having no access on Steersman is I go refinery, gather support. I go refinery, put 2 troops in, and then I just go gather support and buy the commander, and just say that's my round one. And like assuming that there's nothing useful to buy on the row, I just pick up and prepare the way on the row, and I mean that's about it. That's basically my round one. And I'm pretty good set up for round two because I have a commander. I have 2 more troops back, and I've gotten some reward from the round one conflict because I put 2 troops in. Most of the time, I'm getting at least some reward for 2 troops. If not, maybe even getting first. But that's a rare scenario.
Hmm.
Okay, well let's go in the case that you do have faction access. What are your premium spots first? Say you're given just one faction access. Where are you going?
Default move is deliver supplies unless I see that acquire special slow contract. Then I might go do the full service, assuming I don't have a yellow. Um, so those are the 2 main spots. Fremkit is okay if you really need persuasion, but since you don't have that extra water to start, it's pretty difficult for you to get at Fremen friendship early. So Fremkit is mostly just for the card draw, less for the possibility of going siege Tabor.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything else to add on to that. Yeah, goes deliver supplies, go do the full service if there's a spices low contract and you have slot one. Other than that, I mean, secrets could be good if you have your diplomacy. Obviously, play your diplomacy round one. Um, but if it's your Sikh allies, you don't have to play it because you know you're gonna end up playing it once eventually, and you want to send your Sikh allies to a space where you're going to get the most value for your faction access. And sometimes I will hold on to my Sikh allies just to take it to another space on like a later round. Um, I've had
Yeah,
decent success with it, but obviously situational, up to you. And I
I would
guess
say, sorry, I would
no,
say if
no,
you
continue.
are buying a faction access card, playing the Seek Allies is fine. If you're not
Yep,
buying a faction access card, let's say you're buying a blue, a prepare the way, then keeping the Seek Allies makes a lot of sense so that your deck is better balanced.
yep. Fully agree with you there. And I guess I mean that's about it. I guess the last thing we can talk about is like your path to 10, right? Your path to ending spice, like ending the game on round 10. or like round seven. Sorry. Like how are you getting
Hmm.
there? Okay, so you have a default point at your your first player token, right? Then
Yep.
you have your four friendships that you should most likely be getting, so that you can activate at least all four of your nav slots. Um, Obviously, if you find some trick with like captured mentat or or I guess that's about it, right? Or I guess the bump
Hmm.
down, bump up a nav card, and you find a way to pull off all four. But like assuming that you get all your four friendships, that's another 4 points. So you end up that's a five. You hit your one match, that's six. Spice slow, you should as steersman, I think you should be at least aiming for three. If you don't hit three, get at least two. So that's at least eight, right? Your ninth point should be at least an alliance, most likely going to be the spacing alliance because that's the one that you should be going for early. And then more thoughts on the 10th point or like the final point. How are you getting the 10th point?
Um, so a couple options. I think the third spices flow tends to be the most common. The
Five spice for
any
a
of
point.
the
That one
five
could be a
spice, yeah, five spice
yep.
per point. Whether you pay it that way, you can also buy a tech for a point. Um,
That's true.
whether
Sardukar High
it's
Command.
um,
Yep,
Sardukar High Command, Ornithopter Fleet. There are some options for that, and sometimes an entry like an opportunism or strategic stockpiles. So there's a lot of different ways to get that extra point. Um, could be a
even a
second
second
alliance.
alliance. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, yep.
With buy access.
So
What is your second alliance like go to second alliance though? I'm curious.
um, usually for me it's Emperor. I think Benny tends to be the most contested, and Fremen I go to the least. So Emperor is my default second alliance.
Okay, all right.
Um, Reminds me of playing Shaddam. It's sort of easy to get that spacing in for combination.
Yep. Um, I mean, I guess that's about it. If you get lucky with the Spice Raiders combat and you end up winning that and you have three spice for a point, that's another way to get your 10th point. Corn City, to win another way to get a point. Um,
Hmm.
but generally, your 10th point should be another spice and slow. So you should have obviously, you start with one, the four-player point, then you get four friendships, one alliance at least, two spice slows on round six and round seven. And if you have slot one, you should have a third one off of just the nav card, which should be your ninth point, and then your 10th point is going to be the match. Um, that's the easiest way to get there. Yeah, I mean, I think that's about it. I mean, nothing else we can really say about Steersman, right? Pick up spice cards. Pick up cards that allow you to rotate your spice flow. Pick up cards that have access to spaces. In terms of skills, pick up skills that give you resources or persuasion. Key to buy. And tactiles, pick up tactiles that give you effects for having high persuasion or allow you just bumps in some form. Yeah, I mean that's about it. We've talked about some of the opening lines as well, and especially the nav cards. We talked about that one in depth. Um, yeah. Anything else to like final remarks, Morph?
Oh no, just thanks for having me on. It's been
Yeah.
fun. I get to watch you play a lot of Steersman. So since you are, I guess you play probably the most out of anyone that I've seen. So yeah, it's been great talking to you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for spending the time and out of your day to come onto this channel. We appreciate that. And that's about it. Well, see you next time.
Cool.
Yep.